how much self-love had a downstream effect on everything else I did. So I wasn't like a complete people pleaser, but I was definitely somebody who was in the service of others. I was always putting others first. Let's say, Olivia, you call me at 2 a.m. and you said, hey, you got to fly out to California. I need you to take care of the dogs because we're going somewhere. I would do that. I'm always going to be the best friend you've ever had, but I'm going to sacrifice and compromise myself so that I can be that person. Recently, I realized that by doing a lot of those things, by putting everybody else first and not focusing on who I was and what I needed, I wasn't doing what we discussed earlier, which was like my cup was empty and I was exhausted.
Breaking rules is how we grow. Richard, thank you for being part of Building Iconic today and taking the time to chat with me. And I'm really excited to hear more about your story and what you're building up now. I stumbled across you on LinkedIn from another connection, Allison Rand, from the last episode of Building Iconic. And I started perusing your website for Second Harvest and fell in love with the idea. And so tell us a little bit about you, your past, and what you're building with Second Harvest.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm quite honored. I don't think we have time to go through all of the details of my past because I've had a very colorful past, but I've allowed myself to get easily distracted and gone down a bunch of side paths, if you will. But I've always found my way back to the idea of designing and creating things. So I'm a maker at heart. I was that kid who had a t-shirt business when I was 12 and was building beds by the time I was 17 as a business. My dad was an entrepreneur and I saw him in the factory making stuff and I got excited by that. My mom was an artist and I got really excited by her being able to take an idea and turn it into something physical. It felt like magic to me. It felt like a magic wand. You have an idea and then you make it happen. It's literally taking something from nothing and turning it into something that everybody else can see. And as a child, I don't think I really understood how magical that was. Only later on, people were like, oh, you can do that. You can make a thing. And so all of the expressions of what I've done have that thread there. They have this thread of entrepreneurship or making or creating, building products, building brands, designing things, which are in your mind just hallucinations. They're just these ideas. And then one day you make a thing and suddenly there's a product in front of you, or you're having an experience where you've collected dozens or hundreds of people together. I've been fortunate enough to make documentary movies, physical products, digital products, books. I've written 4 books. We've done so many things, but I've always done it with other people, and I've done it as a way to find the relationship magic. Very few of the projects that I've ever worked on are solo projects, and the solo projects feel a little bit hollow in the sense of like, where's the value in like creating something magical by yourself? So that's me. I'm a maker of things, a creative things, and I'm still trying to find all the different ways that I can do that.
And I love your background. And as a mother, I will say when I hear stories like this, I always think, oh, like that sounds like my son. Like he's like the kid with the t-shirt business, building 3D prints and like trying to sell them. Like he's just creating. And so I resonate with a lot of what you were saying about building from my own current experience and also my son as well. Tell us what you're building with Second Harvest.
Well, Second Harvest was in some ways a selfish endeavor. I had got to a point in my life where a lot of things had happened and I had experienced a lot of things that were by some measure traumatic. So I had lost my wife to cancer almost immediately after that, lost the business that we were running together to COVID. COVID It was a co-working business, and COVID uh, required us, at least in the state that we are in, to shut that facility down. Um, and I was raising a child by myself. I was a single parent, essentially, or an only parent, because I was the only one left to take care of him. I've got two older sons as well, and it was just a very trying time. And what happened about 2 months after Christy died was something really, really significant. And that was my friends, about 8 or 9 of them, called me up and said, "We've rented a house in Mirren in the Headlands. Bring your bicycle, bring your son, meet us there. And for the next 10 days, we are going to do nothing but ride bikes, hike in the woods, go for long, dinners together. And we are just going to be together. No agenda. We're not going to fix you. We're not going to, you know, just, essentially take your grief away. We're just going to be there for you." And these are people who've got real lives to take care of. They're guys running billion-dollar funds and CEOs of businesses, and they've got their own families. They've got their own partners to be caring for, and yet they took time out to care for myself and my younger son, but in a very just subtle way. There was no there was no therapizing, right? Nobody was there to fix anybody. It was just an opportunity to talk. And I came away from that and I thought, wow, that was the best therapy I could have ever asked for that wasn't therapy. And how many other people who are grieving, whether that be something as significant as the loss of a spouse or just a massive career change or a divorce or any number of things that can happen to us which are jarring and triggering and changing. Where do people go? How do they get the support they're looking for? And as I looked around, I noticed that so many Americans were lonely and isolated and didn't have the friendships that I was experiencing. And so I thought to myself, what could we do if we created an environment, a physical and mental environment, where people could come together and do what had happened to me, help each other, support each other, form an alliance that wasn't predicated on the idea that you're broken or predicated on the idea that you needed therapy, but rather just to be present, to break bread, to talk over, around a fireplace or over a meal or while you're walking in the woods. And soon after that, I met somebody who I'm currently in partnership with, and she just blew my mind. She was like, "Richard, you have to do this. We have to do this." And we decided to create something that we now call Second Harvest, which is a series of retreats and now a summit that's coming up in the spring, where we bring people together. Most of them are strangers. Most of them have never met each other before during moments of transformation. So like I said, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be, the loss of a spouse. It could be any moment in which you are wondering what is going on here. It could be as simple as we had a couple whose sons went off to college and now they were empty nesters. And they were, what do we do now? Our purpose as parents has changed. What do we focus our energy on? What do we focus our time on? And these conversations that happen over these 4 nights and 5 days in these exquisite locations that we choose bring people back to who they were, and they remember who they were when they were a child. Oh, this is what I loved. These are the things that I expressed myself through. These are the conversations that I want to have. So I think they come there thinking it's going to be a retreat, but they leave with friendships and alliances and clarity that can only come from stepping out of the world and stepping away from all the distractions. And it's more than ever something that we as humans need. We really need that connection that isn't just a distraction or a dopamine hit from your device, but really understanding who you are and who you are in relationship. So that's what Second Harvest is. It's still early days. We're still trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up, as they say. But it's been incredible. We sell these events out, and they are very, very popular. We're just trying to figure out how to do that more frequently without losing the intimacy.
Yeah. I want to say that every company, every phase, figuring it out. I feel like it's always that way. But what an incredible story. The starting off point to have, first of all, that community around you that kicked off the idea when they first took you under their wings and were like, let's go and do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine when you say these stories, I think that folks who are taking on and going to your retreats, they come out with those deep friendships of people that would do that for them. Because I
Mm-hmm.
imagine it's a very immersive experience. And when I was looking at your website, I immediately ran to my husband. I was like, we should go. Like, this sounds like, and I think, we're both very highly successful people, my husband and I. And, we have two wonderful kids and we have the storybook life. I really,
Mm-hmm.
everything I've ever dreamed of, I have. And we're at this phase. It's like, once you've built it all, where do you go next?
Mm.
And I think that that's what I was interested in when I saw your website, of this phase of transformation. And it's like, we don't want to retire, but we know that we don't want to keep
Right.
doing everything the way that we're doing, because we want to enjoy life. And to
Yeah.
enjoy life, I think we need to build a little bit less, in a sense.
I think you've nailed the very core of what's happening, especially in America, where you and I grew up with the 55-year-old looking like a golden girl. You looked that way, and you also behaved that way. You extracted yourself from society. You moved
Mhm.
down to Florida. You drank Mai Tais and played pickleball and bingo. And it was the beginning of the end. It was you checking out and you fading out of existence. Now, I don't know any 55-year-olds that look like that. Certainly not any many 55s who want to do that. Now, there might be somebody who says, I've worked a long time and I want to do less, and I want to kind of maybe do that in Florida. But most of the people that I'm meeting, and especially the ones that are successful, have an expectation that their second half of their life should be better than the first half of their life. And that's a big difference, because my parents' generation was probably the opposite of that. They were like, hey, the first 50 are going to be great and the last 50 are going to be, I don't know, maybe not great. Kind of a downhill, if you will. It's the back nine, as some people talk about it. Whereas our generation is thinking about this, no, this is an opportunity for us to take the wisdom and the experience and the mistakes, right? All the things that we've done wrong, and say, okay, what are we going to do with that information? What are we going to do with this wisdom? And yes, what got us here made us successful. Yes, we have time and money and wisdom because of the things we did. But those things may or may not necessarily be the things you want to carry forward. Maybe you want to carry forward a different story, a different identity, a different role. And we're all looking at each other saying, okay, well, where do we go to do that? There's no MBA for that. There's no school for that. So Second Harvest, we joke, is this classroom without teachers. We're all coming together. We're all smart. We're all experienced. We've all had success in our lives. And now we're sharing that in a way that says, hey, I'm going to learn from you. You're going to learn from me. We're going to build an alliance around whatever you choose to do with the second half of your life. And I'm going to help you get there. And I'm going to bring my wisdom and my network and my wealth and everything to guide you towards that. So you want to start a new business? Great. We have this really lovely story where a woman who's a medium, so she literally talks to spirits. This is like what she does. She came on the retreat. And then another woman who's from the southwest of the States. She's evangelical Christian, runs a huge $1 billion fund. The two most opposite people you can imagine found each other at the retreat. They're now writing a book together, and they got matching tattoos. So
What?
you can't make this stuff up. We are bringing the most unlikely bedfellows together to create beautiful projects and beautiful things together, whether they are businesses, whether they are just friendships, whether they are alliances. And we are not telling them what they need to do. We're not saying, this is our playbook, go and do that. Or on your way out, there's a gift shop, go and grab our book, read the book and do what it says. What we're saying is, you may have an idea that binds or connects to another person's idea, and together you guys can go and create that, and we'll support you. So, whatever that looks like, whatever that means to you, whatever purpose looks like for you, we're here for you. We don't know what the answers are. In fact, we are really in the question business more than anything else. And then living those questions and using the principles of brand and design, this is where it gets really practical. How do you make that happen in the real world? Well, design gives you a blueprint for that. You need some kind of hypothesis, an idea of what you're going to test. You build an experiment around that. You thin slice that into something that you can do today or tomorrow. Find some answers. Go and find product market fit. Does this idea work for me? Can I get it supported? How do I find the necessary team or partnerships to guide me through that? Now that I've got some more information, do I have a better question or do I have some answers? And then cycle through that. And brand, represented by personal identity. Who am I? What do I want? Now, you're a mom, and you know this, and you're a wife as well. You know that very early on, as a woman, you were told you have to serve. You've got to raise your family. You've got to be a good partner. You've got to be a good employee. You've got to give and give and give and give. And at some point, you were wondering, when do I get anything back? And when do I get to focus on who I need to be? And we notice this a lot, not just in women, but mostly in women, where they've given so much of themselves, and the role that they've been playing is provider and supporter, cheerleader, stage mom, right? Just you're there for everybody. And then you get to an age where you're like, hang on a second, I need something as well. And it's not selfishness. It's got nothing to do with being selfish. It's got to do with selfhood, recognizing that you are ultimately going to be the best provider and supporter when you have your oxygen mask on first. If you're so busy helping everybody else, you deplete yourself. There's nothing left there, and you're just wearing yourself slowly out until eventually you get to burnout. Whereas when you're at the core of that story, you know who you are, and you know what you want, and you know what your purpose is, then your cup overfloweth, and then everybody can come and participate in that wealth of who you are. And I think that, from a brand point of view, is what we're doing at Second Harvest. We're asking, Olivia, who are you? Who do you want to be, and who do you desire to be? And if we can help you get there, then that cup will overflow and everybody else will benefit from that. But if you're constantly putting everybody else first, people pleasing, extreme altruism, then there's not much left for you. And ultimately that does lead to burnout.
I experienced this after my second child, actually, as felt like I was taking care of everything that I needed to take care of. And then I had another child, and there was a whole nother bucket of things to take care of. And I got to the point where I was so overwhelmed, I had to take space and reassess, like, how do I live this new life with this new child and not burn myself out? And I had this thing called my mental hygiene toolkit, where I literally just started gathering all the things that helped me recenter. And I decided that I was going to be selfish and do those things. And even in spaces where sometimes it's like you have to make the choices, like, okay, my daughter needs me, my son needs me, but also I need myself. So in that moment, I had to pick a lot of, like, I need to take care of myself and do my hygiene and make sure that I am full enough to take care of others. And my mental hygiene toolkit has changed over time. I would say my daughter's 7 now. It's changed quite a bit, but that got me through a tough time. I mean, it was on my list, just to throw it out there, was like cold showers, breath work, meditation, binaural beats, yoga. I literally was like doing all of these things to recenter myself and to make through like having this sense of like constant overwhelm and anxiety that I was having because I just had so much to do. I felt like I had so much to do. Now my hygiene toolkit is a little bit different, but I love that you are.
Do you mind if we just hang on that? Because I'm really interested to hear how that evolved. Because you said you started with a kind of a collection of things. Did you find that they were maybe more meaningful in some areas of your life or times of your life, or did it just like serve their purpose? And then once you found a way to get there, they were different. Like, why did it evolve?
I've tried to unpack this quite a bit actually for myself. Um, and I got to the point where doing those list of items for me didn't feel like, in the beginning, it felt like it was healing. And then when I kept doing it and repeating, it felt like, it almost felt like subconsciously I was telling myself I was broken. And I know that sounds weird, but it was like, it got to a point where I couldn't meditate without feeling like, oh, I'm trying to fix something. And so I was telling myself subconsciously that I was broken, and I decided that I needed to cut that part and say, because I don't want to tell myself I'm broken, because the stories and the things that have happened to me in my life don't make me broken. They make me whole. Like, it makes me who I am. Every challenge I've ever had in my life is something that I've had to overcome. It's made me stronger. And even going through the challenging time that I had becoming a mom of two, even though I felt really uncomfortable at the time, I wouldn't remove that from myself.
No.
And so I think that I couldn't practice, like, let's say, meditation without that kind of internal dialogue. And so I had to reassess, like, what's my new form of meditation? So that's why it's kind of evolved for me.
I'm wondering, recognizing that you were whole, recognizing that you were not broken, there's a self-love to that as well. And do you have a sense of that? Like, okay, this is who I am, warts and all, this is everything that I am, and I love that.
The self-love piece actually came a lot. It's ironic that my daughter's taught me so many things, but in teaching my daughter self-love, I learned it myself. Like, from the second she was born, I was like, you need to be completely 100% confident, and you need to love you. And I would go up to her and I would say, instead of saying, you look beautiful in that dress, I was like, you make that dress look beautiful. You are an amazing girl, Madeline. And we used to like dance in front of the mirror, even naked together. Like, we're beautiful as we are.
Right.
And in teaching her that, I kind of unfolded that for myself as well. Because I can't have my own internal dialogue not be that if I've put it out there for my daughter.
Yeah. And now she's looking at you, watching you, because they're so observant. They don't miss a thing.
Oh my gosh, that is beyond true.
And then she's going to check in on you. You're going to say something and she's going to say, hey, Mom, that doesn't resonate. Or that's not what you say to me.
100%. She does do that. She will call me out.
This is kind of the spiritual part of life where we wonder why these humans are part of us and why they come into our lives. And then we go, oh my God, they're just gifts. They're probably equally as frustrating in the sense of like they're bringing our attention to these things. And that's what probably makes us feel uncomfortable. But at the same time, they're here to remind us, these are the lessons, here are the things on a plate for you. Just be those things that you keep preaching. One of the best things I ever heard was, you should talk to yourself as if you're coaching your best friend. Like, your best friend's come to you and said, I need advice. Because the way that we speak to ourselves is very often, we're punching down, we're hard on ourselves. We don't give ourselves a lick of compassion. But when we think about ourselves as our best friend, suddenly it's different. Now we're like, okay, I've got to speak up to this. I've got to make space for empathy and compassion and love. And then it changes the dialogue completely.
It really does. I think that self-compassion is something that just how you talk to yourself in moments when you're overwhelmed or stressed. And those are the moments that matter the most in your own mind. How you frame something, and when you talk about, design and brand, I love that you're applying that to life, because design
Mm,
thinking is something I have always been a thinker of design and strategy.
hmm
Just I was born inherently with that skill. I truly believe. I was classically trained as a designer and marketer in school, but
hmm
I was always assessing and thinking, what did I want in life? I was
mm,
planning for it. I was assessing it and imagining it. It's like, oh, okay, is that the vision that I want? Do I want to feel this way? Do I want to feel that way? How does it look like? Um, and down to the point of, as I started to realize there's a voice in my head as an adult, now I'm trying to assess, like, what does that voice need to say? How do I want to design that
yeah,
internal world and external world?
yeah, yeah. It's all storytelling, and we have I'll show you. We created this little apparel brand called Domestic Propaganda. I don't know if you can see that. Um, and the domestic propaganda idea is the idea that there's a PR agency in your head that's feeding you misinformation. That's the ego, right? And it's the act of becoming conscious of those thoughts and those feelings. So thinking about thinking, feeling about feeling, recognizing, what we're sensing, and also then recognizing which of those stories we've inherited. So which of those are we bringing along from our past, whether that's our culture, our society, or our parents and teachers, or is that our voice that's coming from our heart? Is that our inner voice? Which of those stories do we need to be paying attention to? And very often you realize the stories that you're carrying around about who you can be and what you're capable of and how smart you are and how beautiful you are and all these things, those are stories that other people have given you to carry. And you have a choice to continue to carry them or to put them down and say, great, thank you for visiting. We're no longer needing you. I'm going to invent a new story. And that's a design problem. I actually gave a keynote at the Massachusetts School of Art and Design 2 weeks ago. And the audience was mostly students, but also a lot of people who were in career transition, thinking about, how they're going to apply design and brand principles and marketing principles to the evolving changes that are happening in the economy now. Now we've got AI and some other tech tools that are reframing a lot of the work that was done and the roles that are associated with that. And I reminded everybody that it's a design problem. Designing your life isn't just about designing the work that you're doing in the office or for your clients if you're a freelancer or an agency, but you can use those same ideas, those same principles to design who you are. You are the ultimate product, you're the ultimate service. And taking the moment to think about the design principles that you've learned and the skills that you've either formally or informally taken on as a designer, very, very powerful. We were talking to Alison about this the other day. The ability to design your life, to frame those stories, to construct them and edit them the way you want, is again a magic wand. It's magical. It allows you to manifest an idea. You've got this idea, this concept, this brief, if you will, a brand brief or a design brief in your head of what you want to be, of what you want to create. And then you turn that into something physical. What does that look like in my life? What are the sensory things in my life that will reflect that? How will I dress? How will I speak? Which words will I use? Which thoughts will I entertain? Which actions are consummate and congruent with that idea, that brand? And it seems a little commercializing in the sense like, isn't that the ultimate spiritual story as well? Yes. But I don't think the universe has a judgment about this. I don't think how you get to your spiritual answer has to happen in the Himalayas. It doesn't happen necessarily in a yoga pose. Like you said, you can use meditation and yoga and psychedelics to get to where you want to go, and you can use design. Design is just another framework within that to say, Here is a magic wand where you can take an idea and turn it into reality. We use it every day. We use it to create, brands, products, services. Why not use it to create me?
I I can't tell you how much I love this concept. And I think that a lot of what we create now, like the ideas of who we want to be. Also, the fascinating part to me is I'm 10,000 100% on board with this concept of designing yourself and using design thinking to, visualize and determine who you want to be. Um, my biggest question mark right now, as in this
Mm,
terms of where I am in my life, is where do you get the inspiration to think of what you could do with a magic wand? Because before,
mm,
even with AI and all this, it's like crazy. Is like the world is changing and evolving. But when I was a kid, I was like, okay, you grow up, you make a lot of money, you have an amazing career, you have a perfect house, you have kids, you have a husband, you have a dog, and those felt easy to kind of map to and
hmm
imagine
hmm
and explore and wave the magic wand and say, by the time I'm 50, this is what I want. But after, you hit the phase, it's like, well, like you said in the beginning, we don't want that to be 50 and just sitting around like a golden girl, right? Like we want to go do things. We want to be different than what was projected to us about what retirement is.
Yeah,
And so now I'm like, where do you get the ideas of the next thing of what you could be?
yeah,
Instagram,
yeah.
LinkedIn.
My goodness. Yes, yes, and yes. Of course, there are so many inspiring things around us. I find that, at least for me in this phase of my life, and it's been true of many phases of my life, it's the meaningful conversations with friends. Now, they don't have to be old friends, they could be new friends. Like you and I are having this wonderful conversation. I'm already thinking about new things just based on the 40 minutes that we've spent together. I think creating the physical and psychological space for meaningful conversations to happen. I think that's one really, really powerful way to do it. Because, as they say, if you think you're a happy person, get into a relationship and then really assess, can you maintain that happiness? Because relationships are the mirrors, they're the tests of who we really are. So relationships are conversations. That's one part of it. The other part of it is being capable of sitting and listening to that internal voice. I probably am going to repeat something that like a Rick Rubin said or something, but we're all artists inside, right? We're all trying to be that 7-year old, that 6-year old that can just be an artist, be a dancer, be a singer with no editing, with no lack of confidence. I have a 9-year old who believes he's going to be an NBA player. Great. He cannot even conceive of any other reality.
Good for him.
And maybe that happens. Who knows? And I think visiting that silence, visiting that quiet voice that doesn't speak very loudly on a regular basis, you can do it through meditation. You can do it anyway. I find meditation's um, part of the story, but I think there's so many other ways to do it. Going for a long walk, um, just diving into a pool and sitting at the bottom of a pool for, as long as you can hold your breath. That's like a moment where it's just like silent down there and no voices in your head. I think anything that allows you to hear your voice, your heart voice, gives you a little bit of that, what you're looking for, that magic, that inspiration, that idea, tuning into your dreams, tuning into your feelings, your understanding of those feelings as well. Where is this taking me? A friend of mine, so right now I'm wearing a shirt that's got little metal buttons on, and I often wear this shirt. And a friend of mine said to me, Richard, it's got to feel like you're in one of those sci-fi movies where there's a magnet and it's pulling the buttons off your shirt. Like, where's the thing that inspires you? Where's it taking you? Where's the button being pulled towards? And I often have that visual. It's almost like a sci-fi comic where, the person is getting drawn by some magnetic field or some unseen force towards that. I think we all have that, but we distracted ourselves from that, pursuing the things that we did. Like you just named all of them. like making sure you got the right house and the right car and the kids in private school and all those things. But you also realize that that's not the thing that's pulling you forward. That's society's story. That's a story that we've inherited. That's not our particular story. That doesn't mean you can't have those things as well. It just means that it's probably not entirely your story. So hearing that inner voice, listen to that inspiring little quiet voice is the work. And once you make space psychologically and physically for that, you hear it more frequently. You start to notice it. As you said, I think at the beginning of this call, you said the right people just come into your life, either as teachers, either as mirrors, as relationships. They just show up when you need to, and you go, "Oh my goodness, how did you know that? That's weird, not weird." Like the signal is there, and if you're aware of it and you're open to it, you notice it. But I think if you're so blindly focused on, the next bonus or the next promotion or the next car, you don't hear those things, you don't see those things, and those the universe is literally handing you a gift saying, "Here's the right person you need to talk to," and you walk right past them.
You're like, bye. And you can do that if you're not paying attention, right? Is
Yeah.
when I say to bringing the inspiration in, I do think the inspiration can come from anywhere. Like when I'm doing client work, when I have a client and I'm designing a brand, like the inspiration can come from so many different places, right? I can find it on Pinterest. I can find it in AI now.
Mm-hmm.
I can find it if I go out to a restaurant. And I think when I'm saying the inspiration to this building up to who you want to be, I think it can come from so many different places, right? It can come from media. It can come from Instagram. It can come from going to the museum.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, and I tell my kids this, that everything that you come in contact with is inspiration, potential inspiration. And I tell them my job as your mom is to give you as much inspiration as I can so that you can make the choices. Do you like it?
Yeah.
Not like,
Yeah.
does it feel? Does it feel right? Does it feel good? Um, and so I think in that process of encountering things, because I'll look at, and I'll say like Instagram, for example, I'm a very visual person. So when I see someone
Mm.
living a life at the age of 60 and they're living a certain life and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Do I like that? And I can explore and I can, dissect it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that I guess my question to you, and because you've done a lot of work, I can tell, is can that inspiration come from nothing or does it need food? Does it need fuel? And I think even for your personal brand or brands in general, like, can the inspiration pop from nothing or does it need some kind of roots or some kind of food?
I don't know if there's a choice between those things that's necessary. I think it's both.
Mm-hmm.
So music, for example, is music because there's a note and then there's a break or a gap and a silence and then a note. Art is the same. There's a line or a stroke and there's the negative space. Even this conversation, if I'm just talking nonstop and it's not, it's just blur. I think if there's a break and a reflection and a moment in between those things, it makes the thing noticeable. You notice the note because there's a silence afterwards. I'll give you a good example. So on one of the retreats, we were in Austria and we do a lot of mysterious stuff. In other words, we don't give you an agenda. We don't say, "Hey, Olivia, you're going to do this, this, and this, and this." We leave a lot of gaps out. Now, for A-type personalities, that can be quite scary. They're saying, like, "Hang on a second, you're going to fly me all the way out to Austria, put me on a mountaintop, and there's no like strict agenda." You're like, "Yeah, I know that's the opposite of your life, where your calendar is back-to-back meetings, and your life is all scheduled, and you've probably got something on the fridge right now that tells the kids where to be and the husband where to be and everything." Like, this is the opposite of that, and you're going to have to lean into that ambiguity and that uncertainty. And so we're walking through the woods. We've taken this group of about 20 people through this significantly beautiful place, just rolling hills in the mountains. And we come around the just there's a little field at kind of an opening there, and there's music coming out of the woods, and we're playing dumb, and we're like, oh, that's weird. There's music in the woods, and we start walking towards it, and we go back into the woods, and in a clearing is a single violinist, solo violinist, playing just in the woods. And it turns out this is the first violinist from the Vienna Symphony playing a private concert for our little group. And everybody silently comes around into this clearing, sits, settles down, and listens for the next hour to this guy playing. And in between each of those notes in the woods is the silence of the woods themselves, of the forest themselves. Between each concerto, whatever he's playing, is a break and a moment. And you look around and everybody's just like in awe, and there's tears rolling down certain people's faces, and they're completely captivated by this. And that is a combination of inspiring, because there's a musician and an artist at work there, but in the space of nothingness, of clearness, of clarity. And so I think those two things are as much as light and dark, as day and night, as you and me, male and female. Like there is nothing without something, and nothing, there isn't something without nothing, right? We have to see these things as contrasting. And very often we're trying to fill the space these days. We're trying to fill the gaps with distractions, with the noise. But really those noises are there to accentuate those inspirational messages and signals. And I think in combination they work really well. In combination they are the contrast that we seek out.
It's so interesting. And, one of the things my husband and I are doing right now is we're really being very adamant on trying to reduce our times on our phone. Like, just not feeling like if there's a message, you have to check it. And the phone makes that really difficult. The phone is so good at removing the space, right?
Thanks to people like us who design these things.
Yeah. Well, we make them to be addictive. I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's our job.
Yeah.
But I was out the other day and at a family place, and all of the adults were on their phones while the kids were waiting to go into this event, like all of us. And I look up, because I had just checked my message too. I look up and I see all the adults on their phones. And then one of the little kids goes up to the mom and tries to get her attention. And she's just still on her phone. And everyone else is on their phones. The kids are running around and the adults are on their phones. And I immediately put my phone in my pocket. I was like, I am literally teaching all of these kids, not even just my own kid, but all these other kids, that we need this device in moments of space. Like we can't even just wait in line for coffee anymore. We have to have our phones out because we're not like comfortable without doing something. And it's not meant to be like a judgment on folks who do it. I know everyone's busy and they have to get things done. Like I totally understand that because I'm busy too, and I'm just trying to get things done. But it is an observation of myself, and what I don't want is to be locked into my phone all of the time.
Yeah. And it's new behavior, right? So we didn't have these phones, 20 years ago. Now we do. We've implemented something at home, so we don't have any screens on Sundays. It's just like a random, I don't know how, it wasn't a religious thing. We're just like, oh, let's not do this. So no phone, no screens on Sundays. And my kids love it. They absolutely love it. It's their best. They always comment on how much fun they had. There's so much more giggling around the house and just generally, creativeness. Oh, let's do this. Let's create something. Let's make something. And it comes out of boredom. It comes out of sitting around going, what am I going to do? And then 10 minutes later, that boredom results in an inspiring thought and an idea of, I'm going to go and paint. I'm going to go and draw. I'm going to go and play basketball. And that's what we did as kids, right? Boredom led to something. Boredom led to starting a t-shirt business or whatever it was that we did when we were kids. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to be bored. I think we are trying very hard to make our kids inspired and active, and and for good reason. I think that's necessary, but we're also not allowing them to be bored, and that's okay as well.
Yeah,
And ourselves, we should be bored as well.
I completely agree. In all of this that you've in your background, I think you said that you've written 4 books, right?
Yes.
Is it 4 or 5?
So Design Sprint was the first book, and then 2 books on leadership, one on design leadership and one on product leadership, and then an enterprise focused design sprint book as well.
Can you give us kind of some of the top principles or philosophies out of what you've written about?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we use the design sprints in our retreats as well. The designs, we don't call it a design sprint, but essentially this is an idea similar to the scientific method where you have a concept, an idea that you want to test, a hypothesis, if you will. And that hypothesis is really just a question. It's a question that is not well answered right now. There's not enough information or not enough research or enough testing. And so that question forms the basis for experimentation, for testing, for design that can then be taken into the world and tested with a person, a marketplace, whatever the end user or the customer of that thing is. And so in a way, we ask our participants to use that idea, take a question that's really meaningful for you, build an idea of what that might look like in the physical world and how you might test that over 72 hours. And that's very similar to the design sprint. Essentially, the original design sprint that Jake Knapp came up with, that was a 5-day sprint inherently focused on startups. And what we said is we think we can apply it to a lot more than just a startup. We can apply it to teams, to groups, to nonprofits, to individuals. And that's where the design sprint book came out. Like, how can we apply this to solving a problem, solving a question, finding an answer to a question? And at the end of the day, it's really almost like a machine where you insert a question in one end of it and then something comes out the other end of it. It might be a better question. It doesn't always have to be an answer. And that question leads to another cycle where you test it again. And so this idea of being able to design a question, design an experiment, and then come up with answers is really powerful because it gives you agency. And so the kind of the meta reason behind doing this is we noticed a lot of teams were stuck. They just weren't capable of getting out of that. Well, we need to do more research, or the CEO wants it to look like this, or the market's telling us that, or our competitors are doing these things. There were a lot of distractions. And so we wanted to give them agency. We wanted to give them that feeling like you had maybe when you were, I don't know if when you were studying, or you kind of had that sense of being a student. You're like, I don't know the answers. And I think I know how to find out the answers. I just have to go and ask enough questions or research this or play with it, or like, as we said, sometimes fuck around and find out. It's like, how do we make this something that's worth having fun with, playful again? And so it gives you agency. And then that installed inside of you makes you feel confident about anything, because then any problem that comes your way, you go, oh, I think I know how to get around this. I think I know how to get over this. And that becomes a confidence booster. And if you work in teams, the ultimate value you can create in teams is this ability for them to feel like they have agency and that they can do that together. So I think design sprints really was about returning authority back to individuals and teams so that they could do the things that they wanted to do. And then the leadership books were recognizing that leadership really isn't about telling people what to do, but by storytelling. Like, what is the story that you can install either in the organization or in the individuals, that they can feel like it's their story too, and they can then use that as a shortcut to understanding what's going on in the world. So if you know what your story is, you know who you are in that story, you know what your character definition, if you will, if you're a player on that stage, then you know how to respond to what's going on around you. You can say, my role in the story is to be this person and to solve these things and to do these journeys. And when I understand that story as a business, as an organization, as a brand, that story becomes so powerful because then it can be referred to others. It can be carried and remarked between individuals. And ultimately, that's the operating system of human beings. Human beings are really just storytelling devices, story capturing devices, story carrying devices. That's our neurology. That's what we do really well. Before there was the written word, there were stories. We carried around this oral history. And so stories are really there as like the fundamental part of leadership. If you're a good storyteller, you can craft a good story, you can tell a good story, and you can repeat that story in ways that are meaningful to the different audiences, you will then bring people with you. The story is that magnetic force that drags everybody out of the shadows and into the light, and then you can follow out, towards that vision. So leadership ultimately is about building the relationships around those stories and understanding how to then craft the story that it makes sense to everybody, that it's relevant to everybody's roles. And that's the biggest lesson that came out of product leadership and design leadership, was that everybody we interviewed that was in a leadership position, they were great at stories. They were great at bringing people along with their stories.
I I lived and breathed this at Airbnb, and
Mm,
the story, the vision, the mission is the story of the company, right? And I think that I I call, this is called building iconic for a reason, because it's about how do you build up something to become iconic. And the cohesive story is one of the biggest piece that I always tell, is something that is so magnetic throughout. I mean, you mentioned the guiding light from yourself. Like that
hmm
story that you're
hmm
telling in the company is that guiding light for the company. And it pulls everyone along, or it doesn't. And if you don't have that strong story and that strong pull and that strong unity, it won't be as cohesive as everyone, a part of the company won't be as cohesive. And so I love that at Airbnb we had the like belong anywhere. And that was,
mm
we
mm.
literally were all magnets to that. And we
I love that.
all lived and breathed that. That was something that, part of day one, that you felt like you're a part of, and you wanted to live that story. You wanted to be on board with it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Airbnb is such a good example of that because if you think about the origin of the company, the idea that you would go and sleep in a stranger's house is so counterintuitive. It's so counter the narrative of what was popular then. Don't get in strangers' cars. Don't find yourself in a stranger's house. How can you trust them? And to flip that narrative requires a very, very, very coherent story. I mean, Uber is the same, right? Don't get into strangers' cars. Suddenly you're getting into strangers' cars, and it's the most normal thing in the world. But there was a time when that was mental. You just wouldn't do that. You wouldn't go and sleep on somebody else's couch. And now it's the most natural thing in the world. So hats off to Brian and the others who created that narrative and like led with this strange new idea that allowed people to form their opinions and change their behaviors around it.
Yeah. And you said that your son, he believes he's going to be a basketball star, and there's nothing else, and he can't imagine another thing in existence. And I think that good leaders do that too. Like Brian
Mm.
and the team there, like the leadership team, like there was no other future. It was
hmm
like, it was laser focused. Like we are going to be, like at one point we even told the company, we don't have competitors. Like no one's competing with us. We're playing in a different field,
Yeah.
like, and we're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
booking.com, no, like we're not competing with them. But it was like, you almost have to be delirious for the idea. You have to have the such 100% conviction and belief in the idea. And if you're talking about a company or yourself, both have to have that same belief that the thing that you want can be in existence.
We have that as children, and then we get told, no, that can't be possible. There are competitors, there are constraints, there are resource scarcity. But I haven't found any evidence of that in my life. I haven't found any lack of abundance. Like wherever, like here's a good example. So somebody writes a new kind of book. It doesn't look and feel like a lot of the other genres out there. It doesn't fit neatly into a category. There isn't an audience for that because there isn't a category within the publishing world that says, hey, this book speaks to this audience. And yet that book gets written and it blows up and millions of people buy it. Why? Well, because when you create something with conviction, you are creating a new reality. You're creating a new category. You're creating a new definition that hasn't existed before. And as an entrepreneur, you have to have that sense of magic, the sense of I'm going to create something from nothing. Because if you only operate within the existing constraints, if you only operate within the existing categories, you can't make anything new and original. You can only copy what's out there. And then you just look like everybody else. There's a guy called Alex Morel, I believe, and he wrote an article called The Age of Average. And you notice that everything starts to look the same.
Mhm.
All cars start to look like bars of soap, and all coffee shops start to have undifferentiated decor. And this is because it's easy to copy and it's easy to look at what's out there and say, I'm going to do that again, just with a different color. But it's really difficult to say the audience for this doesn't exist yet. The shape of this thing doesn't exist yet. It requires, as you said, a sense of delusion. But delusion is nothing more than magic. It's just this idea that you can still create something new. We do need that. We need crazy ideas. We need weird people. The worst thing that can happen to us is that we become average, because then we're invisible. And look, I know for a fact that we're going to die. I'm going to die. You're going to die. We're all going to die. But I don't want to be invisible while I'm alive. And I think the fastest path to invisibility is to be average.
Yeah. I that's 100% spot on. But not being average is so hard to do because it is so easy to fall into doing the same things. When you look at like the trends in website design, for example, when you have a new trend come out and then everyone's like, oh, that's different, it's interesting, and then everyone starts doing it. I think at some point, like Linear's website was copied to the point where it was like a meme. Like everyone started copying Linear's website. But I think to be different and unique, it takes courage, but it also takes like adamant strength. Like you've got to do something with that. You're always kind of fighting against the current of being the norm.
Yeah.
In some way.
And I think that it's normal to want to hear from other people, right? Even in design, we often seek out feedback, we seek out market research, we're looking for signal. The downside of that, of course, is that it can push you towards the mean, right? The regression curve starts to look very much like everything else. There is an optimism, though, and a courage in doing something strange and weird. And that is about as close as you're going to get to feeling alive. Now, I know that a lot of people that are looking out for me and want the best for me are going to say, Richard, do you really want to be doing that? Like, here I am, I'm 55, I'm starting a new business. I'm putting my resources into it. I'm not going to get other people's money to do it. I'm going to do it on my own. And I've had a lot of people say, are you sure you want to put your savings into that? Are you sure you want to be doing that? Why don't you just go and get an advisory role or get a board seat or something like that? And I think that they're doing it out of love. They're doing it out of compassion. They want me to be safe. But I've never found life living in the safety of those opinions. I've always found it in doing the slightly irresponsible thing, the slightly crazy thing. And I also am old enough to know that those things always work out. Because here's the best part. Even if it doesn't work out, even if it doesn't go as planned, something better will come along. I know that's hard for young people to hear. And if you're a young person listening to this, I apologize because I might sound like a crazy person. It always works out. Even when you lose the person you love, even when your business fails. And by the way, I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I've had way more failures than I've had successes. But I've learned something, and I've gained something from each of those experiences, and it's always turned out to be another door opening. It's as cheesy as it sounds. One door closes, another door opens. This is exactly how life works. You are constantly evolving, you're constantly changing. Sometimes that means you've got to fail, you've got to break, you've got to crumble, you've got to shatter so that you can be recreated and remade. That's painful. I get it. I understand. Nobody wants to feel pain. But comfort is slow death. Being comfortable, being average is also death. It's just a much more nefarious, slower version of it. I'd rather die in a blaze of glory and be recreated afterwards in, the hopes and dreams of something new than to look around and say I wasted 20 years of my life doing this shitty job or this shitty thing that basically stole my soul, that stole my will to live. And I know it's not for everybody. And again, apologize to anybody who's like said, "Hey, my path is going to be slightly different. I'm going to choose the comfortable path. I'm going to choose the known path." I don't have any judgment over that. But if you want to feel alive, and if you want to feel aggravatedly positive, in other words, you were like constantly like urging yourself forward, where you've got that feeling of your buttons and your shirts being pulled towards some magnetic future. If you want to feel that, you have to take risks. You have to do something meaningful. You have to have hard conversations. You have to ignore other people. You have to be willing to be disliked. That's okay. It's fine. It'll work out for you. You'll attract people that love you because you did something crazy. And the people that are afraid for you, they may step away for a while because it's too challenging for them. It's too triggering for their own emotions. Because when people are saying don't do that, or you're being crazy or being stupid, what they're really doing is just projecting their own fears onto you. And you can recognize that. And you can say, you know what? You're right. It is crazy, and I appreciate you looking after me, and I love you for that. But that's your life. That's not my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, be a little crazy.
When I left Airbnb to start up Babco, it was one of those risks. Leaving a full-time job to start up something, I didn't know where it would go, but it was out of that space where I wanted to try to claim some time back and space for myself. I really wanted this duality of being a powerful woman and have an amazing career, but also be able to be the mom that I wanted to be. And oddly enough, working at a full-time job at Airbnb did not allow me as much flexibility as I have today. Like if I need to take my kids to the dentist or I've got to pop out early, like I have support in my company that I can do those things. And I carve out space and time I get to choose when I have conversations versus it being imposed on me. And so those differences, it's amongst a lot of other things. I won't list them all out, but I understand this, the need to be kind of this courage to take a different step and create something different. Yeah. What would you say to folks, though, that do feel that way, maybe want to do it, but just haven't taken that step yet?
Yeah, it obviously it's going to depend on your situation. I certainly don't want to talk people into taking risks that are going to create pain for them. But I will say that you can run experiments. One of the beautiful things about design is it teaches you those experiments. It teaches you how to experiment. So we call this at Second Harvest, we call this thin sliced experiments. So what's the smallest, thinnest version of that new experience that you are looking forward to? What does that look like? That's that business that you want to start. Could you take on one advisory client, for example? So let's say you still were working at Airbnb. Could you create space for one advisory client or one consulting client? Can you try that out? Could you do a very small project? Could you do a 72-hour project, for example? Could you do a project that didn't last more than a couple of weeks, just so that you get a feel for that? What does it, what does it look like? And then take that information and expand on it. Well, what would this look like? Could you go back to your team and say, hey, I'm going to be working part-time. I'll still be able to give you X, Y, and Z, but I can't do everything. Willing to take a pay cut because I'm also going to be doing this other thing. These are very often conversations that good leaders are willing to have. So when I joined InVision back in the day when InVision was all the rage, and I met with the CEO Clark, and I said, look, I don't know if I can be full time. I've got a speaking slash author life that I am part of. So I write books and I go on the road and talk about those books and speak on stages and run workshops. And I've also got a wife at home who's ill. We didn't realize at the time she was going to be terminally ill, but she was quite sick. And I've got a baby at home and two older sons that I need to take care of. And Clark was amazing. He said, Richard, those are the reasons why we're hiring you. What we're not interested in is you doing some kind of punch card 40-hour a week thing. What we want from you is to create outcomes, to create changes in the way that we work with our customers that are positive. Now, if you think you can do that part-time, let's do that. Let's figure out what that looks like together. So although I was being a salaried employee, I was also writing books and I was also advising clients and I was also speaking at events, but I was representing this brand. This brand is Richard Banfield. And representing this brand was a way for InVision to borrow some of that aura, if you will, and associate it with their brand. And that's how smart brands work. I bet you Airbnb says, hey, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's a good evangelist for us. It's a good associate, what's the right word? Like a representative of our brand. Now, we don't want them to, let's say it was Kim Kardashian, for argument's sake. Kim Kardashian is Kim Kardashian. You don't want that to be any different. But if Kim Kardashian says, hey, I stay at an Airbnb, you get the benefit of Kim Kardashian taking her brand and lending it to you. And in the same way, Clark was buying my brand, paying me a salary so that I could be there to do the things that we could do. That we could create things together. We created documentaries. We created a learning platform. We wrote books together. We did all kinds of wonderful things together. So I think that there's versions of this. Mine seems a little kind of show businessy when I describe it like that. It's not. It's much more practical. It's like, okay, I'm coming along and doing certain things. I believe I can also do other things. How do you then carve out the space for that? It's obviously a conversation with your spouse, your partner, your family. How am I going to do these things? And then step by step, you ratchet it up towards something that you want. Now, that's one way to do it. The way that I like to do it is I go all in. And the reason why I go all in is because I need to be psychologically all in. I need to have 100% focus. So what I'll do is I'll build up a nest egg, kind of a war chest of resources. That could be money, that could be connections, it could be a whole bunch of things over a period of time. And then when I'm ready, I go all in on my idea. So that's another way to do it. So you're going to do something, you're eventually going to get there, you're going to raise money, you're going to save money, you're going to borrow money, you're going to do whatever it takes, you're going to have all the hard conversations. And then you say, okay, from here to here, this is an all in. I'm going to give myself 2 years. And then I'm going to go and do this thing and I'm going to find out what happens in 2 years. And if it's still going well, great, then another add whatever. For me, it's a little bit longer than that. I need a little bit more time because I like to ramp things up. But I'm all in and then I ramp it up. And then I'm 100% committed to that thing. And I will not consider anything else while I'm working on that. I will turn away everything else. So I do go through those phases where I'm building and collecting resources and being a little distracted. And then I go all in on something. So that's one, there's so many different ways to do this. And I'm sure we could have a podcast just on that, like all the different ways that you can entertain your crazy ideas. And another way is to be a franchisee or like borrow somebody else's brand, borrow somebody else's momentum and take what money you have and time you have and invest it in that kind of thing. So there's so many different ways to do this.
There definitely are. And I'm curious, like you must have learned so many things over this span of time in your career and what you're doing now. But I'm going to ask you just like a series of like quick questions just to like get some quick answers. And then I'll ask you my final kind of question for the podcast. But what's one thing that you learned that surprised you recently?
Recently, how much self-love had a downstream effect on everything else I did. So I wasn't a like a complete people pleaser, but I was definitely somebody who was in the service of others. I was always putting others first. Let's say, Olivia, you call me at 2 a.m. and you said, hey, you got to fly out to California. I need you to take care of the dogs because we're going somewhere. I would do that. I'm always going to be the best friend you've ever had, but I'm going to sacrifice and compromise myself so that I can be that person. And recently, I realized that by doing a lot of those things, by putting everybody else first and not focusing on who I was and what I needed, I wasn't doing what we discussed earlier, which was like my cup was empty and I was exhausted. And so turned my attention to self-love, to self-care in a way that was really different to what I'd done before. It was compassionate. It was like caring for a person that I hadn't cared before. And that allowed me to then realize, oh my God, there's so many other things that are connected to that. There are so many downstream benefits to having your mask on first. I can now be the friend that I need to be. I can be the business person I need to be. I can be the father I need to be. Those are things that I can do better because I'm taking care of myself. And it's taken me 55 years to get there. But yeah, that's the most recent lesson that I've learned.
Better late than never.
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell me one thing that you learned across your career that really surprised you.
Oh, I think it's the lesson that I keep on learning, and that is at the core, design and art are much more similar than I thought they were. So I used to think that I used to actually make this a statement of mine, and even on keynotes, I'd be like, art's something that you do just for yourself, and it's an expression of yourself, and design is what you do for other people. And I keep on learning this lesson that like in the best design is the artist, is the true voice of the artist. And in same is true of art. In the truest art, if you do really good art and you keep it in your studio and nobody gets to see it, I don't know, is it the tree that falls in the wood and nobody hears it? I think so. But if you make art and then you share that art, you post it on Instagram, you tell your story, there's a design element to that, right? There's designing the story, there's designing the narrative. The art now wants to be something so much more. People will call you and say, I'm coming over to your house and I'm going to give you thousands of dollars for that art because that story means something to me. You told me something that I heard in my heart as well. Now, if I just had it in here in my studio without that voice, without that design, then it didn't do that. So I think this is the lesson I keep hearing in my head over and over again, in my heart as well. It's like design and art are so much closer together than I thought they were.
I went on vacation to Europe and I was looking all around at like all the art and the beauty. And I came back, I always come back from vacation with some nugget of wisdom for myself. But I came back from that vacation going, I'm an artist. And I claimed that like really strongly, that like for the first time in my life, I'm like, I can call myself an artist. I make art, even though that art might be a website or an interface or brand, like it is art. And I loved that title for myself. And I completely agree. They're very related.
Yeah. And you know what's so hard is like actually saying that out loud when somebody says, you meet somebody at a party or a coffee shop or whatever, and they say, what do you do? And you go, I'm an artist. And the first time it comes out of your mouth, it feels like you just spat up barbed wire. Like it doesn't, you're like, what am I doing here? And they go, oh my God, you're an artist. What's that like? And then suddenly you're like, oh wait, it's cool. And they're like, yeah, it's cool. Oh, it's so cool, especially for an adult. Like that's the most amazing thing.
It really is the most amazing thing. So tell us what is your kind of your mental hygiene toolkit, if I would say? Like what are the things that you do that make you whole or that give you the space or fill up your cup?
So art is one of them. So I find myself doing art as therapy, like a expression or a cathartic way of expressing myself. And it's funny because it comes in waves. If I've really got a lot on my mind and I feel like I've got something to say, then the art really just flows. But when I'm in a peaceful, passive state, I feel like the art isn't coming. Like it's more, it would then be forced. I spend a lot of time on my own. I will walk on my own. I will exercise on my own. I'll just sit quietly. My dad used to say, sometimes I just sits and thinks, and sometimes I just sits. And that's like resonant with me now. Um, and I think the other thing that I've become aware of in my mental health is that I'm not really a good meditator, or the yoga stuff is maybe not like perfect for me. But what really works for me is just some like physical labor.
Mm.
Like I'll go and we live on about 2 acres of wooded land here, and I will go out and I will chop wood for an hour. I will carry that wood. I will do yard work. I will do very old school physical labor things. I love it. I was like, oh my God, this is why people buy little farms and things and they chop wood and carry water all day, because there's something quite honest and humbling about that work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I find no AirPods, just go out and chop wood. You've got to be focused. You've got to have your attention on that thing. Otherwise, you're going to chop a foot off. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of like it is meditation in a way, because it is incredibly clarifying, focused thought. So yeah, that's a surprising thing. I always used to think I had to be sitting in meditation, or listening to binaural beats or something like that. But now I find like, oh no, it's actually just labor, just
Yeah.
good old fashioned labor.
I I completely agree that meditation can be so many different things. And I was sitting in an Alan Watts experience. I don't know, do you know Alan Watts?
I
And it
do, of
was an
course.
amazing
Yeah.
experience in Oakland, California. And it was in a dome. And it was so immersive. Like it was art to the max. Like I was in awe. It was so beautiful. And you're kind of leaning back and you're looking up and it's playing one of his speeches. And you're listening to his speech the
Mm,
whole time. And of course, they have binaural beats going on at the same time. And this amazing projection that was like visual art that was going along with what he was saying.
mm,
And one of the things that he said, it was the talk is called Trust the Universe. And
yes.
it was all about how to just trust the universe. But one of the things he said was that meditation is like a form of art. Like you don't do it to get
Mm,
something out of it. You're doing
mm,
it because
mm,
you're enjoying it. That's when meditation
hmm.
is the best. And, going back to when I said I stopped being able to enjoy it, therefore I shouldn't do it anymore. But I think there's so
Yeah,
many other
yeah.
things that you can do that
Good
are
point.
like meditation, that are like art, and you just go to enjoy. You do it to enjoy it.
Totally, yeah. Playfulness, just not having an objective, not having a goal, just doing it for the sake of doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you my final question on the podcast.
Mm,
And this I
yeah.
ask everyone. When did you realize you're building up something to become iconic? And you can take this as any form you want, either your own brand, what you're building up currently with your company. Um,
Mm.
and iconic, I always say, doesn't necessarily mean that something is iconic now or is becoming iconic, but whatever you think iconic is for you. So you can answer the question that way.
The first time that I shared the second harvest idea with a group of people who I didn't have a relationship with, in other words, they weren't friends necessarily or close companions of mine. And there was this almost awkward silence afterwards. And then somebody stood up and said, Richard, you've struck gold. I think I realized there was something bigger, a movement maybe even, that we were just starting to touch on. And I didn't even realize that at the time, because it was, as I said in the beginning, Second Harvest was the salve that I was putting on my own wound. It was the healing that I needed for myself. And then somebody stood up and said, I want to be part of this. This is something that I need too. And then everybody else kind of chimed in. It was like, yes, this is what we need now. This is relevant. I realized the timing, the moments, the era of this has begun. The era of people like you and me meeting our midlife and saying, nope, this is not the end. This is the beginning. That wasn't just me. It was everybody. And I believe there are 80 million Americans that are going to retire in the next 10 years. So that's about 80 million Americans who are between 55, call it, and 65. 80 million Americans are going to have this conversation, Olivia.
Yeah.
80 million. It's a lot of people who need friends, who need support, who need love, who need to find their stories, to need to connect back to themselves and with others. It feels like a moment. It feels like a special moment.
I love it. Well, congratulations on even being able to say that you've had that moment, and there's so much that led up to it. And I feel like we could talk for so much longer. There's so many more things I could ask you, but
Well, no, I need to ask you. I think I interview you next time.
we could set that up. But thank you so much, Richard. That has been such a fruitful episode and so much to unpack. And I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. I really did.